Hey, welcome back, Faithful Politics listeners and watchers. If you're watching us on our YouTube channel, we're so glad to have you. Make sure you like and subscribe. That definitely helps us out quite a bit. Thanks for tuning in. I'm your political host, Will Wright, your faithful host, Pastor Josh Bertram. He's not here. He's working on his third playthrough of Baldur's Gate 3. But this week we have with us Ross Bennis. Did I say that right?
Benish, but that's good enough.
Spanish. Okay, all right, good. So he's a critically acclaimed author, cultural commentator. He's out with a new book, which I love, the title and everything about it, called 1999, the year low culture conquered America and kickstarted our bizarre times. Mr. Ross here has got a pretty impressive career spanning journalism, media analysis, and has worked for outlets like Entertainment Weekly, Rolling Stone, Wall Street Journal, the list goes on and on. And we're just so happy to have him back with us. So, hey, welcome back to the show.
Hey, good to be here.
Awesome. Your book in the show would seem like an off pairing on the surface. So, I mean, obviously, like I grew up in the 90s. 1999, what was I? I was a senior in college. And I just remember just having like the 90s were just a great time. So maybe, first tell us like, what is your book about 1999? And from there, what broader implications does it have, for America today?
Sure thing. So the book is about how the trashiest aspects of our entertainment from the late 90s are with us today and influence our society in unexpected ways. So that can range from Jerry Springer, the talk show format, morphing into the way our current national politics function, to pro wrestling storytelling, driving a lot of the ways that corporations and nonprofits and even politicians sell a false story to the audience because they really want to believe something, even though it's untrue, to the religious following that the Insane Clown Posse has. It's become very common for leaders, whether they're political or business leaders, to try to project an outsider status, to create an us versus them. And they can get a group of loyal congregants, kind of no matter what they're congregating around, as long as those who are together perceive that society has it out for them. And no one perfected that better than the Insane Clown Posse in the late 90s. And so all these things that were mocked in the 90s are shaping our culture today in ways that we don't often fully appreciate.
Yeah, which is wild. And one of the things I really like about I got sent an advance reading copy. I'm flipping through it, and I'm seeing a lot of things that are just bringing up all these like memories. Like I like.
Yeah, there's some nostalgia in it for sure too.
There is. Like
I like all these things that are in there. Like I like the Insane Clown Posse. I watch Jerry Springer. Yeah.
Yeah, even like Limp Bizkit, like you talk about Limp Bizkit in there, and I'm thinking to myself, like, I don't know, like I'm a closet Limp Bizkit fan. I actually think that they made some pretty good music, but I want to focus just on the Insane Clown Posse. So tell me a little bit more about like how did Insane Clown Posse ICP have an effect on politics today?
Well, if you just look at how effective they have been in like I said, creating this us versus them, being proud, they have with their subculture, their fans are very proud to be looked down upon. I see that with like people embracing the term deplorables. Mm-hmm. It's very much like juggalos are they don't care if you mock them. In fact, if you mock them, that makes them band together better. Violent J said something about Violent J is one of the members for the Insane Clown Posse. For those who are not familiar with the band,
actually, Russ, can you just explain? Like, if we have listeners that are like, "Who the heck are these?"
Yeah,
people
I just realized I'm probably saying these things like everyone knows what the Great Malenko and the Joker cards are. So the Insane Clown Posse is a rap duo. They began creating music in 1992. They peaked in the late 90s in terms of their popularity. They dress up like clowns. All their songs about murder and magic and sex. They have a loose religious affiliation throughout their albums because they have a concept album where each album is called a Joker card, and there are these characters that are part of their like mystical carnival. and then that's kind of like the Black Carnival is what they call it. That's their religion, and they spray Faygo soda on their fans during concerts. They're very theatrical. It's like a cartoony version of a Stephen King movie, if you will. Shock rock, sort of like what Alice Cooper would do, but probably not as terrifying as Alice Cooper was in the 70s. And they were mocked. They were called the worst band of all time by Blender Magazine. USA Today rated a few of their albums as the worst albums of the year. They were like Nickelback before Nickelback, when everyone just kind of poops on them.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like a running joke, like, oh, Juggalos, they have the big gathering every year where all the Juggalos come together and they have a crazy carnival of rides and has-been 90 acts, and it's always held in the rural Midwest. They have their own interesting subculture, and that's very religious-like. But some of the tactics they've used for their marketing and for bringing together people, I've noticed in not just in politics, but even in congregations, like just. Or you could say ICP stole it from church marketing. It's a chicken and egg a little bit, but the way they pit themselves against the world, they sued the FBI, for instance. That's really pitting yourself against the world, is the way I often would see my priest back in the day, like get up on the pulpit and say, everyone has it out for you, even though we live in a town where 90% of people are also Catholic, but they all have it out for you.
Yeah. They're white dudes, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. They're two white dudes from Detroit, high school dropouts. They are making music in a genre that's primarily Black artists. They do a lot of collaborations with Black artists, but yeah, they are white rappers, and they come from the same place as Eminem and Kid Rock. It's pretty common to have white rappers in Detroit, actually.
Yeah. Talk to us about, all right, so we know who the band is, we know who the players are. What is it about their tactics specifically that we have seen translated into either the political realm or the religious realm? Because you mentioned that, folks have taken some of their tactics and implemented kind of for their own purposes. But yeah. Is it really they've taken the ICP's tactics, or is it they've developed tactics that are similar to ICP?
I think they developed tactics that are similar. ICP just embodies those tactics. I doubt the Trump campaign was sitting there watching Gathering of the Infomercial videos on YouTube and seeing, is this how we can reach this populace? But and ICP, they're not like super political themselves, even though they sued the FBI. So I'm not trying to put anything on their band or hate on the Juggalos or anything. I'm down with the clowns, whoop whoop. But they have a way of making downtrodden, especially poor white people who may be described as white trash, feel welcomed and recognized. And that's been a huge part of our national politics. People that are otherwise often scoffed at. Juggalos aren't upper class people for the most part, but ICP has made them felt like they're part of something. They can gather around this thing, and this thing just happens to be their music. Their music isn't even that important. It's just that these people happen to be together around something. And you see that lifestyle marketing with some of the Trump branding, and bringing people together, the deplorables. You're mocked by the East Coast elites. We're going to appeal to you hardcore and get like rural conservatives on board with our lifestyle brand. I see a very similarity between those two, even though I don't think the ICP is like anything like that party.
Yeah. Because I think they didn't like campaign, or at least put their endorsement for Kamala Harris.
Yeah, they did. Which they don't typically endorse the candidates, and obviously that endorsement didn't swing the election.
Weird, yeah.
Yeah. I would have thought, the ICP vote would have.
Yeah. Would have come out in 4 days. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm gonna read a quote. So you have, the insane clown posse perfected a gimmick that has since become influential in religious and political discourse. Today's religious leaders imitate ICP when they sell the story of us versus the world, while generating intense loyalty from those who buy into their outsider projections. The outsider label ICP personified is resurrected when religious figures lean on persecution accusations to rally people to their own causes. The believers who remain unite over their shared belief in receiving resentment. So kind of put that into frame that kind of in modern day politics and religion.
Well, I would say like some of the war on Christmas stuff could come up with this. You're made to feel resentment, and you will go with the people who are aligned with you. And this could swing the other way too. If you're a liberal person living in a conservative area, you'll probably feel some resentment that makes you stronger identify with the minority party. And in fact, sometimes the more you're perceived to have messages directed against you, the stronger you will react to that. So I think about like, the national press, mainstream publications, not so much podcasters. They almost all of them like endorsed Harris, endorsed Biden, and endorsed Clinton before that. All three times they ran against Trump. That didn't swing people who were on the fence or who were conservative toward that camp. That made them get their guard up more and identify with the person who was attacking those outlets in Trump. So, with ICP, I think every time you would, some magazine would try to tear them apart, or someone would mock the gathering and say Juggalos are white trash, that just made them identify further with the band. And that's why it's so hard to for Democrats to make any inroads in rural areas, because the people there, not everyone, but like statistically, overwhelmingly, so identify with being perceived as being attacked by the press or by liberals, and they just like, they become more conservative the more messaging they get about it.
So, what about the satanic panic? You talk about the satanic panic in your book, and like Geraldo Rivera, and again, like going just blast from the past, just thinking about what I remember the most about Geraldo, anyways, is him opening up the tomb. Like, or I forgot, there was like
Al Capone's vault.
Yeah, it was like some live thing too, and it was a
it was a huge success too. He opened Al Capone's vault, a vault beneath an old Chicago building. It was like a 2-hour syndicated broadcast.
Yeah.
181 local TV stations opt in for it. It was the most syndicated special ever. It was live, even though almost all the segments except for him walking around were pre-recorded, and there was nothing in the vault.
I know.
It's just an empty container, and he's just looking around it, feeling like shit. But that kickstarted his career. That the success of the Al Capone vault. That's how we got the Geraldo Rivera show, and which became the forerunner to all the other 90s daytime talk shows that we leaned on trashiness. Like Jerry Springer's the king of it, but Ricky, Maury, Richard Bay, there's a lot of them.
Yeah. So talk to us about the satanic panic part. Like, why is that relevant? How do we see influences of that today?
Well, it's very easy for a large group of people to believe in conspiracies, and the satanic panic of the primarily the 80s, so some of it in the 90s, nationwide witch hunts for people being accused of doing all sorts of things to children that there was never any physical evidence found. I mean, these kids would tell stories of being on brooms and witchcraft and flying and cannibalism and bestiality. And if you look at the McMartin case in Los Angeles, they dug underneath the daycare to have these tunnels because the kids were coached by these psychologists to say that they were being trafficked through these tunnels, and there was nothing there. It was, and thousands of kids. They would say stuff like the number of reported murders from this, like if statistically exceeded the number of missing people total in the United States. Like the claims got so out there, and it just went on and on and on. And so now, QAnon would probably be the closest comparison. But there are others online that when you're in an echo chamber, and it's very easy to be in them, I'm probably in more of them than I realize myself, you start to believe some nutty stuff, and that nutty stuff doesn't stay there. There was a rumor that like politicians, like state senators, were voicing on the floors of their legislature that kids at public schools were going to school as furries dressed up in animal costumes and pooping in litter boxes. And this is like why public education is so bad, because they provide the litter boxes. 10-year-old kids have litter boxes at their desk. And then people believe this. My sister believes this. I got into an argument about it with her, and I just had to let it go because someone who she knows knew someone else who worked at a school where this thing supposedly happened. And those people aren't as rare as we would like to believe. So the satanic panic was amplified, though, by these talk shows. Like Geraldo Rivera was probably the worst instigator, telling parents to fear for their kids if they're doing any of these signs. And the signs are like, is your teenager moody? Do they want to be isolated and left alone? Do they like to listen to heavy metal music? I'm like, well, these aren't warning signs of someone doing satanic ritual abuse. They're warning signs that someone's a teenager. But that's what they would amp it up. And today you have that with some of the most popular podcasters on the planet. For the sake of getting people to tune in, or maybe they believe it themselves. They're so into it, will spread this nonsense. And the talk show format was a huge reason why that satanic panic spread like fire. Oprah Winfrey was actually one of the worst offenders of them all. She brought on this woman named Lauren Stratford. She brought on several people who are widely discredited. For God's sake, she made Dr. Oz famous. But before that,
thanks, Oprah.
She brought on Lauren Stratford, who claimed that she was having babies as part of a satanic group and sacrificing them, and they were filming it, and this is what, and it all turned out to be lies, and she's just a mentally disturbed patient. And when that was all resolved, Lauren Stratford pretended to be a Holocaust survivor, and she wasn't even born at the time that would have lined up at. So there's a lot of room for hustlers and just miscreants to get a platform. You have a huge Twitter following doesn't mean that you're saying anything that has any validity.
That's so interesting. Like I wonder, like it seemed like the 90s gave us a lot of tools, good, better, and different, to exist in this current like environment. And one of the tools, which is probably not the best, it's profiling. So like you've got a person, as you're talking, during the satanic panic, that are, hey, do you have a teenager that's moody, cranky, doesn't listen? They maybe worshiping the devil, kind of thing. So like you have this time period in the United States history where, you're being told how to identify somebody by these particular markers, whether those markers are actually true or not.
You saw it in Columbine. Like, you couldn't wear long trench coats. Like, you're going to shoot up a school if you're wearing long trench coats. A lot of controversy. Keanu Reeves wearing that coat in The Matrix and The Basketball Diaries, and like kids at school couldn't wear leather coats. I mean, how many? Like, what the hell is a leather coat got to do anything? But anyways, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just saying there was a lot of those things in the 90s.
It really was, and you address Columbine in your book as well. Tell us about it.
Well, Columbine was it was obviously a terrible event, just a complete national tragedy, but it prompted a moral panic, or at least fed into a moral panic on violent video games causing teens to, shoot up the school, or just blaming mass murders on violent video games rather than looking at like other causal factors, even though violent video games are played more often in Japan and South Korea and England than they are here, and those places have way fewer murders. And there's all these other reasons you could go into why that's a little bit nonsense. But it was the video games were the form of entertainment that was picked on in the 90s in the way that TikTok is right now. They're about to, they want to ban TikTok. Social media social media obviously has some downsides, no doubt, but there's also, if you watch the congressional hearings, the people asking Zuckerberg questions don't even seem to understand how it works or how the advertising behind it works at all. And you had a lot of that with video games in the 90s. And before video games, it was movies, and before, and rock and roll, and before that, like comic books and the radio and jazz. And it goes all the way back down to the written word, where there's a new form of entertainment that emerges with youth at the time. everyone gets scared and blames all sorts of crimes on it. Radio and comic book, there were congressional hearings on comic books 70 years ago.
Really?
And how they were, and Frederick Wertham, huge nationally known psychologist, got New York to censor comic books. You couldn't have certain words in the titles, you couldn't have certain images in the covers. Big First Amendment issue, because they were saying that it was causing juveniles to, fight and kill and skip school and all these other things. Comic books, even Superman, not even the horror titles, were blamed for this. So there's a new cycle every 20 years, and video games now just don't have the pressure that they used to, because the average age of the gamer now is 35, because video games exploded in popularity during the 90s. The PlayStation was the first console to sell over 100 million units. So like Nintendo, Sega Genesis, and the early Atari, those were kind of niche. By the time you get to PlayStation, PS2, Xbox One, now it's super mainstream. The Mario movie just did huge numbers. Like, it's super popular intellectual property, and now adults are comfortable with it, so we pick on the new thing that the kids are doing. But Columbine got dragged into that because what were the kids doing? They were playing video games like Doom, and the killers did play Doom, but suddenly you get activist lawyers filing hundreds of lawsuits claiming that the shooters aren't the ones to be held accountable. It's these video game studios for making this violent entertainment. And after social media in 20 years, there'll be another thing that, my kids will be pissed off about that their kids are doing.
Yeah, I as you're talking, I'm thinking about, maybe you've seen this meme. It's like, in the 90s, we were told not to, get in a car with a stranger or whatever. I forgot something else. And I was like, now you can just, pick up the phone and use an app to get in a car with a stranger or something like that. It's like the Overton window of what is normal and acceptable has shifted quite a bit from like the 90s to today. What used to seem like very taboo and faux pas is now mainstream.
Well, there's another one of those, and it's like your parents used to be the ones who tell you to be careful with like information you take and don't believe everything you listen to. And they're the worst ones on Facebook. They believe anything that's on Facebook. They treat Facebook like it's the Associated Press, even though it just, it could be some lunatic making comments.
Yeah. Yeah. Why do you think that is? Like, why do you think, in 20-year time period, a generation, it's like things that were faux pas are like normal?
It's hard to adjust to technology as quickly as it advances. So like my parents, it's really hard to be given a iPhone for the first time when you're a senior citizen. Like, your brain, you just did not develop with it. You came up with such a different time. And the same thing is going to happen to us. I was a huge gamer as a kid. I don't play them much now. I tried to play the new college football game on the latest Xbox system with my nephew, and like, it just got destroyed because it's not even, it's like way different than PS2 even. Like, it's there's so many more controls and things you could do, and I'm just lost. I could probably eventually figure it out, but boy, so the pace of communication and technology and media distribution changes so rapidly from when you're a young person, or even from when you're a young adult to an old adult, that if you don't put a lot of time in with those systems as they're developing, and you suddenly get them, you're just blown away. Like, the person who's going to believe the most BS on Facebook is going to be someone over 60 most often. Not always, but like, if we did a panel and you put some untruths on Facebook, you could fool a 70-year-old before you could fool a 30-year-old pretty easily. And you could probably fool a 30-year-old easier than you could fool an 18-year-old.
Probably, yeah. I was thinking about, there's a song by Bo Burnham, I think it's called FaceTime with My Mom. And like, it's all about, him trying to have a FaceTime talk with his mom, and his mom has like the phone like this, super close to her face or whatever. And yeah, it's just really funny. Well,
my dad's speakerphone, everything, YouTube video, jacked up, sound all the way up. I just hope he doesn't put on porn when he's at the supermarket. Is the thing I pray for.
I learned a word from your book that I'm not familiar with, called kayfabe. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right.
Yep, you're saying it right.
So explain to us what is kayfabe, and how does it relate to religion?
Sure, and it certainly relates to politics too. But kayfabe is a pro wrestling term. It's basically to present something as genuine, even though it is not. It's selling like a scripted story. You're suspending disbelief because it's more fun to buy into the illusion than it is to think about reality. So when they say that Hulk Hogan is the strongest man alive and Andre the Giant has never been body slammed before, you want to believe it. That's part of the storyline. When you see like a really tiny guy do a choreographed kick to a giant guy, and the giant guy goes flying over the ropes and he can't get up for 2 minutes, that's kayfabe. Everything about wrestling is kayfabe. But now we have kayfabe all over in our society. We're told, when Trump got elected the first time, Sean Spicer comes out and says that was the biggest inauguration crowd ever, and he just keeps saying it because that's the story he's selling. But that's kayfabe. When the ACLU says that an abortion ban is most likely to affect LGBT people, that's kayfabe. They want to appeal to that demographic, but that statistically, not even possibly has any truth to it. So all these political groups, whether it's a nonprofit or a party or a candidate, they will go out on the trail or they'll send emails to their fundraisers and they'll say something that is just blatantly false because that's the story that they want to sell. Just like a wrestling booker wants to sell Hulkamania. Another one would be, right now we're trying to regulate data and advertising in Congress. The biggest advertising lobbyists, the trade groups, now say they support a nationwide data regulation. But at the same time, those same people will work against it and support all these other ways of tracking consumers that they're not talking about because they want to give the facade that they support it, but they don't actually support it. It's nice to say, I represent the world's largest advertisers and I'm against sharing people's data without their consent, but that's not what they actually do. It's kayfabe to say that they do so, and that's exactly what they do. It's all over in our world. It's spinning BS for the sake of pushing your own narrative, and it's everywhere, all around us. But in religion, I guess it depends upon your pastor and your denomination, but kayfabe I thought of was just like when I was a kid and I'm told everyone's out to get me, even though I live in a place where everyone's that same religion. Who's going to come out for us? There's 10 of us in our town of 300 who aren't Catholic.
Yeah. Why did you land, or maybe the better, how did you land on the 90s as being sort of this crucial, period in American history?
It's just a lot of the stuff that I like. So there's a bias to that. I grew up in the 90s. I was born in 89. So the 90s are my entire childhood. And I wanted to write a book about low culture. I like trashy stuff. Like I like bad movies. Sorry, I just gotta, I like bad movies. I like pro wrestling. I don't have the best taste in clothes. I'm sure my wife would agree with that. I'm not a man of high taste. And when I started thinking about what essays I'd work on and put them together, I came across the 90s. But I also noticed just in our society, when I would see something like, Trump going on the Undertaker's podcast is a great example, but there's many other examples where you would see something in the wild and you'd be like, wow, like they really did like a WrestleMania entrance for like that senator to walk down the aisle. Like you just see pro wrestling where you wouldn't see it otherwise. Or I would see like a reference to Juggalos I wouldn't see otherwise. And enough of those happened that I put together a book, and it seemed better to focus on 99 than on 98 or 97 because everyone freaked out at the end of the millennium.
That's true.
Well, not everyone freaked out, but there was a crazy time that there was a lot of stories of, Y2K and paranoia and turn of the century, and there's more interest on it.
I remember, so I've got a brother-in-law who basically like canned, I don't know, hundreds of like jars of food and stocked up, toilet paper. I mean, basically was ready for Y2K.
Yeah. Survivalist.
Yeah. And I remember when it passed, he was basically like, yeah, no, Yeah, we've got food for the whole year now. You know, it's all pickled. But, yeah, so
Hopefully, he has some dogs that can help him out.
yeah, yeah. Well, looking at another sort of 90s kind of thing, what about a Pokemon? Like where are we seeing gotta catch 'em all
Oh,
in the 21st century?
oh man. Well, Amazon.com is probably the best place you're going to see that. But we
No,
buy more and more stuff and we save less and less. The national savings rate has declined quite a bit since the 90s. And it's like we're just out there catching them all. And, Pokemon, Beanie Babies, those were the things that blew up in the 90s that everyone felt like they had to collect. They'd be considered valuable at the time because there was a perception of rarity, even though that wasn't true. And now you have these like digital artworks like NFTs that you got to collect them, you got to buy them. They're the hot thing. People are going to go crazy for them, and everyone loses their mind, and then 2 years later they're worth nothing. And there's been various types of collectibles or toys that have had their market shoot way up and go way down. But when I see like the kind of the craziness of capitalism, there's greatness too with capitalism with Pokemon. I mean, Pokemon taught kids how to day trade and the value of tracking a commodity, and they had fun with their friends. It's a pretty tame activity, catching pocket monsters, and they would play these video games with their friends. So there are, I'm not gonna say like it's like a total bad thing, but when you have to have 150 plus of these monsters and you bankrupt your parents doing so, it could get a little out of hand, and it's a brilliant marketing strategy. But really anywhere where you see a small commodity being really oversold and its price spike and then plummet once people like finally come to their senses, that's where you see you got to catch them all. And very big in the crypto world.
Like what influence do you think the internet kind of played in all of this? Before you logged on, I Googled what were internet speeds in 1999 or common internet speeds, and it's like 14.4K or 28.8.
56K modem would probably be what you're using, right?
That's big time. You're balling then,
Yeah.
but like look, especially with Pokemon, Beanie Babies.
Oh yeah, Beanie Babies are huge on the internet. That's how they took off. Like they were one of the first to do digital marketing super well. They had all the information on their website. They'd have stuff about Beanie Babies you couldn't learn elsewhere. They were ahead of the game for sure.
Do you think that the internet played a part in perpetuating some of the things that we've already talked about? Like the ICP stuff, the satanic panic, all that kind of stuff.
Less so with the satanic panic. That was earlier than most online communities developed, but certainly with other subcultures and certainly with Beanie Babies and the internet. 1999 is actually a really pivotal time for that because it was the first time. 2000 census, which is right on the cusp of that, was the first time that the majority of Americans reported having used the internet. Like it's not like they're using it daily or hourly like we are, but at least 50% of the population had a concept of what it was and had gone on the internet. They crossed the Rubicon, right at 99. Media distribution was changing. All these things are so influenced by changing media distribution. 99, Napster launched, so you had a change in how files could be uploaded and shared. Questions about intellectual property. TiVo also launched in 1999, so suddenly you could store and record and not have to watch things live. On-demand viewing became a thing for like really the first time, aside from taking a physical, VHS tape and sticking it in your VCR. So those things happened, and old school media hadn't yet died. Newspapers were still thriving, and magazines were thriving. Cable television was having the best years of its history. Like in 1999, Viacom was the most valuable entertainment brand in the world. And they were mostly, cable networks, but they also owned a lot of other stuff. They owned Simon and Schuster and Blockbuster and a lot of other things that are decrepit now. But the media distribution led by the internet is a huge part of why these things take off. I have a chapter in there about internet pornography and how like all these free speech battles that happened at the time because there was so much anxiety over this new thing on the internet and all the attempts to regulate it. You know, they take the worst thing on the internet, which, you know, tends to be porn, and they try to regulate it. And, you know, people felt really anxious about it. Kind of like right now, I think people feel really anxious about AI and, you know, what's that going to do? That was the internet in '99.
Yeah, that is I do remember a lot of those porn conversations. Not personally, but like I just remember talk about those porn conversations, and I also, you know, remember reading somewhere that if not for porn, like the internet wouldn't probably be what it is today.
Well, it
'Cause
wouldn't. Yeah, video chat, bandwidth, file sharing, tracking users through cookies. I mean, and then there's other, you know, even like YouTube and Snapchat were started around sharing nudes. Basically, YouTube was started to share the Janet Jackson Nipplegate thing.
Oh yeah, that's
So
right.
there's a lot of these like little things, especially with internet, but even before that, like with VHS and, you know, VCR versus Betamax, huge tech adoption platform. It can go in all sorts of crazy ways, but they, you know, when you have an illicit trade or a trade that like is viewed as immoral by a large percent of the population, you have more incentive to take business risk. So like online purchasing, like pornographers are the first ones to really do that in bulk, because like before Amazon did books, why would you want to sell your business online? Like why would you just sell your product online in the 90s? Like no one's buying things yet. Putting your
Yeah.
credit card out there seems crazy. Like how is that even going to work? But if you're doing something that you want to privatize because it's taboo, you're more willing to take a risk. But like you probably aren't going to buy your dog food that way, the way you do now, because you just go to the store to do it and not take that risk.
That's true. So what about like positive influences from the 90s? I mean, you know, so far we've talked about, man, like we've really done ourselves a disservice by, you know, carrying on some of these traditions that started in the 90s. But like what are some of the positive
Yeah, I should
influences?
probably focus more on, you know, this is a good question because most of the stuff I think about is dire, even though I like these
Yeah.
things. Well, positive influences, we talked about juggalos a lot. You know, whether someone projects an outsider status doesn't have to be good or bad. It can, I mean, it doesn't have to be bad automatically. There can be good in it. The juggalos who get together find a lot of camaraderie. Like there is a sense of togetherness and belonging that these individuals get from following this music group that they might not get anywhere else in their lives. And that's true of other fandoms as well. But, you know, whether I question how they did it, there are still positives in those individuals' lives. If we look at reality TV and then like some of the internet stuff that came out afterwards that began in the 90s, a lot of people got a voice in media who did not have a voice before. Like to get a talk show or any sort of you know, media platform, you had to be pretty credentialed or connected to someone in that industry. Reality TV allowed a lot of nobodies to become at least semi-famous. There are some downsides to that too, but there are people like who get a voice their opinion on things who didn't. I mean, this podcast without the internet and things that happened in the 90s, it'd be so hard. You could probably go on traditional radio, but there'd be fewer slots. There'd only be as many, you know, you just have your slot for the day, depending on the wavelength of the station. There's an unlimited number of podcasts you can make, and they thrive because of that. So more people get their voice heard. I think video games have a lot of positive aspects too. The moral panic around them being this thing that drives antisocial behavior and kids to commit murder is a little silly, but gaming is like the most common entertainment form for people under 20, especially. It's the most financially successful medium right now. It makes more money than music or film or books combined. And a lot of gamers, like they make friends that way. Some people meet their spouses that way. They enjoy it. They wouldn't do it. You wouldn't spend 3 hours playing World of Warcraft, you know, each day if you thought it was terrible. It's like bringing you some. I mean, granted, you could get addicted to it, but it's bringing you some sort of dopamine. So, each of these aspects, each of these like little things in low culture, I think can have positive if done in moderation. Don't fill your house up with Beanie Babies, but playing Pokemon with your friends, or playing a new game with your friends now. I don't think that's bad. It can be quite good.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's the second time you said you used the word low culture. Can you define that? That's a term
So low
that I
culture,
don't.
so it's the divide between high and low probably doesn't even exist hardly anymore. But like to take the stereotypes of it, high culture would be like the symphony and Shakespeare, or in this case, like really critically acclaimed books or TV shows, like the TV show Succession on HBO would be high culture. I'd say like,
Mm.
Publications like the New York Times that have a wealthy and affluent readership for the most part would be like high culture. Low culture is what would be considered trashy. So, like Vanderpump Rules, like reality TV shows like that, pro wrestling. Beyonce would probably, I mean, even though it's popular, Beyonce would probably be considered high culture because she's very critically acclaimed. Limp Bizkit would be considered like low culture because anyone who's a music critic just, tries to rip them to shreds. So basically, looking at things that people feel that they are above, that's high culture. Low culture tends to be more popular though. For all the heat that Jerry Springer took in the 90s, more people watch the show than any other show put on during the middle of the day.
Interesting. And do you get the sense that either politicians or religious leaders have learned to tap into the like low culture?
Oh yeah. Look at the congressional debates now. You got state senators or you got U.S. senators threatened to fight Teamsters in confirmation hearings. That's a Jerry Springer segment. Like the shouting and threatening. George Santos. I've been talking about Republicans a lot. Democrat. George Santos.
Yeah, he's a Republican.
He's a Republican. I just feel like he got replaced by a Democrat. But
like
he,
a Michael Avenatti as a
yeah,
Democrat.
or Menendez, a Democrat in
New
Jersey, I think.
New Jersey, yeah.
Yeah. His corruption trial, like everything about that is like low culture. Just how bombastic he is about denying these things that are kind of true. It's really like a Jerry Springer segment. But I brought up Santos because he's not in office. People probably forgot about him by now. But I mean, he was like getting Botox and spending his funds in all sorts of ways and doing cameo videos about it. I mean, he's really wanting to be a celebrity. He's using the office to try to be like a Bravo star, like a Bravo celeb star. And I think you're going to see more of that. People obviously think of Trump because he was the star of The Apprentice, but it's like it goes so much further beyond that. I mean, even the videos that some of these senators will make on Twitter or on TikTok, they seem like wrestling promos, like or reality promos. Gavin Newsom had a debate on Fox News. I can't remember which Republican governor he was debating, but he's cutting promos of it online. I mean, it reminded me of like the Ultimate Warrior talking about WrestleMania 7. He's like getting all hyped up to make this little video to talk about debating someone who has nothing to do with governing his own state.
Yeah.
Which is on fire now.
Yeah, which is really sad. My mom lives in California still, but when you think about low culture, because it just dawned on me, like some of the names of the people that you mentioned, Geraldo and some of the wrestling stuff, like the Trump campaign seems like they've really tapped into that. I mean,
yeah, they did. I mean, they had Linda McMahon and Kid Rock and Hulk Hogan at the convention where he was nominated. They all spoke or performed. So that's like, and like 2 days before that, he went on the Undertaker's podcast. So he's definitely tapped into it.
I did not know the Undertaker had a podcast. Because he was
Mark
one of
Calloway.
which is so weird. Just kind of tangent, but I was a huge WWF fan. Ultimate Warrior, Probably one of my favorite wrestlers. And I remember um, my dad trying his best to tell me that wrestling was fake. And me as like a little rebellious kid, I'm like, no, like you don't know what you're talking about, Dad. And this is about as real as it gets. Like who can jump off, like the top turnbuckle and land on somebody and not get hurt.
So your
Like
dad was, so I was your dad. I'm gonna sound patronizing here, but I was your dad, and my family member who thinks kids are pooping in litter boxes at school was you saying, "No, this is happening," and I'm like, "No, it can't be. Like, you ever go to a public school? No way."
yeah, yeah. So I guess looking at the writings on the wall, um, at least I don't know in the past 10 years, like what about the last 10 years do you think will be normalized 20 years from now?
Oh yeah. Well, a lot of this stuff's already normalized right now. The outright hostility and like Jerry Springer like feuding in Congress, I think is going to outlive Trump. That like I don't see that
Hmm.
going back. People seem to like it. Those who do it often get reelected, or if they don't get reelected, they get like they become a celebrity afterwards. So I think that will be normalized. The kayfabe, just continuing to sell stories that aren't true. These organizations like ACLU, but there's also others that historically would stand for a principle. They more so stand for like a group of people now, no matter where they are on that particular issue, and will kind of bend and twist what they do so that they push something that puts their congregants in a better light, even if it's just total nonsense. So yeah, I don't expect the kayfabe and lying and distortions to go away, and this faddishness of the Beanie Baby like gotta collect them all sort of thing that happened with NFTs. That won't be here like every year, but there will always be some sort of commodity that's ultimately worthless, but for a small period of time has everyone's attention and seems like it's worth so much. And there'll be a lot of people who will benefit and profit handsomely, and many, many more who will lose a lot of money. So I don't know what the next thing, if you go from Beanie Babies to NFTs, I don't know what it is in 20 years, but there'll be something that is just stupid and you should not spend your life savings on, and people are going to do it anyways in mass. That's going to be here.
Yeah, I'm wondering if the .com bust. I think that happened in the 90s.
Yeah, yeah, 90s, early 2000s. Yep,
Mm.
that's in the book as well. That's in the chapter about Pokemon and Beanie Babies, because that was kind of the macroeconomic reflection of what you saw with Beanie Babies. Like, just throw all the money at the .coms. Like, they gotta be
Yeah.
worth something. Pets.com spends $5 on advertising for every dollar in revenue, but that's gonna work out.
Yeah, I mean, because if not for the .com thing, I know so many people that are like, oh, there's this new thing out, I should invest in it because all the people that invested in the .com, are like multimillionaires or whatever
The
now.
ones who are around.
Yeah, true. The ones that are around.
Like 100 companies tanked for every Amazon that worked.
Yeah, I mean, like, who knew if I would have bought, Amazon shares when they were selling books only for like $5 or whatever.
Yeah.
Like
But you
where,
might have accidentally, if you were in .coms at the time, you might have said, I'm gonna put all my money in Cosmo.com, which was a grocery delivery service named after Cosmo Kramer, the Seinfeld character. And that company didn't exist 2 years after its IPO. Because you couldn't buy and sell groceries online like a convenience store in 1999. There's just not the demand for it.
yeah, that's true. It would be almost like,
Half the people weren't even using the internet.
yeah, probably couldn't afford the internet,
And if
I
they
mean,
were,
but
like, who has the time to put in a credit card? They were the only thing they were purchasing then was books and porn.
yes. Although, every household in America probably had that AOL CD.
Oh, true.
Um,
That's true. I feel like that came with, like, you just get that in the mail, whether you want it or not. It was coming.
yeah, it was either the AOL or in our house we were CompuServe people.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had tons of those AOL things, which in hindsight I really wish I still had them. It would have been a cool little
They used to
memento.
put
But
CDs in cereal boxes back in the day. I don't know if you remember. Like, I don't know if AOL did that, but in the '90s, you'd get CDs in a cereal box like a prize, but sometimes it'd be a CD. Like the video game, um, it was a Doom ripoff made by the snack Chex. So like Chex had a Doom
yeah,
game.
I
And then if
remember.
you bought Chex, you would get like a CD-ROM to play the Chex version of Doom.
Yeah, that's so
I
great.
think
That's
Pepsi
so,
Man was another one. You could play Pepsi Man.
yeah. So well, how can people I guess follow what you do, buy your book, do all that kind of stuff? Or when is the book coming out?
The book's coming out in April, but you can pre-order it right now. I prefer that you go to bookshop.org, but it is also on Amazon, and the press is the University Press of Kansas if you'd like to go straight to them and not give any of your money to Jeff Bezos or anyone else. That'd be great. And you can follow me at rossbenes.com, ROSSBENES. I'm also on Twitter and LinkedIn.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Rod. This was just a really fun conversation I have down memory lane. I was looking at the time, like, dang, like it's already like 50 minutes in. So, yeah, make sure you go out and buy the book. Follow what Ross is doing. I got to tell you, if you were a big fan of the '90s, as Ross and I both are, you're going to love just catching up on all the old things, and then you'll have a new perspective of the stuff that you're looking at, because you'll be looking at the world through '90s colored lenses. So go out, buy the book, and thanks again for Ross for stopping by, and yeah, to our audience and everybody, you all be good. Make sure to keep your conversations not right or left, but up, and we'll talk to you next time. Take care.